Hey, you guys, it is C and Nash, and thank you so much for tuning in to another week of Mirror Reflections. So, yeah, that was my attempt to sing, and no, I cannot sing, and no, I do not care. I'll sing anyway. But thank you so much. It's been fun. We've been trucking along, and I just realized that next week is the wrap up week with Mirror and Reflection, and I honestly don't know how I feel about it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just get right into the topic today instead of thinking about it. So we're gonna be talking about S.U.P.A. S-U-P-A, SUPA, like super duper fly. So S.U.P.A stands for Standard, Unspoken, and Publicly Accepted. So think of that when it comes to social norms. And that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. And S.U.P.A was actually coined by none other than Miss Feisty Desi in the novel Mirror and Reflection. And she comes across S.U.P.A a lot when she starts to really hang out and befriend and connect with the clique. And so to kind of backdrop it and kind of paint to lead us to this point, right in the beginning, Desi comes across Demi's journal, and Demi in her entry kind of shares, she's very honest about how she's feeling, and Desi realizes at that point that Demi wasn't as happy as she portrayed herself to be. And so Desi's kind of like in this frenzy to really figure out what happened to my sister. Why did my sister, who had it all together, who had everything going for her, why did she commit suicide? And so this leads her to befriend the clique. And Desi doesn't really care too much for the clique. This is like a necessary evil, I guess you can say, that she has no choice. So when you think of the clique in Desi's eyes, think of like a cloud of glitter, expensive perfume, and cologne, and that's pretty much the clique. But she ends up like befriending the clique and getting to know them on a deeper level, which really surprises her. So the members of the clique that you'll hear about today is Leland and her best friend Crystal, and then you have Caleb and Brandon, then you have Kayla and Emma. Emma's actually Demi's best friend, and then you have Noelle and Mackenzie, and those are the people who make up this clique. So Desi gets confronted with a lot of social norms that some of them she was like, okay, this makes sense, and some of them she was like, what? And in fact, one of them was this big hoopla about football and fall ball and homecoming. And so Desi is asked to go to fall ball, which is the homecoming dance, and she is presented with what she considers to be S.U.P.A. So let's hear what she has to say. So at this point, they've been dancing, having fun and whatnot. And Mr. White, who's the school principal, gets on stage because he has some announcements to make. So this is Mr. White talking. Now to what everyone has been waiting on, the announcement of this year's homecoming court. Mr. White walked to the table showcasing the crowns. We'll start with our younger courts. Prince and Princess for freshman court are. Shouts rang as one perky girl and one overly enthused boy took the stage to accept their crowns. Both were pretty cute together. This stuff, I decided, was one of the reasons I avoided dances. It was all a popularity contest. The reigning beauty queen and king from each class were selected to receive crowns always. It was a rule I considered as S.U.P.A, Standard, Unspoken, and Publicly Accepted. Prince and Princess for sophomore court are. Demi had always been completely devastated each year she didn't make court. Apparently, though she had come close, she never won. Unsuccessfully, I attempted to console her by dismissing its significance. The whole thing was so overrated. Desiree Vander! Automatically, I began to clap. Several people turned to look at me. Staring blankly, I wondered why they were looking at me. Why are you looking at me? I asked aloud. Desi, Mackenzie waved. He called your name. You have to go on stage. What? I blinked. Brandon nudged me. I glanced up. You gotta go get your crown, babe, he smiled. Congrats. I walked numbly to the stage. Congratulations, Desiree. Mr. White smiled politely and placed a tiara on my head. I stood by my prince, Patrick Holland, a boyishly cute athlete who played baseball. He gave me an arrogant grin and nodded. I continued to stand on stage as Mr. White announced the remaining court winners. Brandon and Leland were named king and queen. Afterward, Brandon sauntered over to where I stood. So how about that? He lifted my chin and brushed a light kiss against my lips. I'm king and I got the hottest princess on my arm. I shook my head, ignoring the silliness I found in his statements. Congrats, Brandon. So rule is I got to dance with the queen. Brandon extended a hand to Leland. Is that okay with you, Desi? Oh yeah, definitely, I stepped away. Cool. Come on, nice queen, Brandon joked. Let's see if you can keep up. Yes, let's. Leland rolled her eyes. I watched as the two made their way to the center of the floor. After declining Patrick's offer to dance twice and then once again as I left the stage, I headed toward the bathroom. In awe, I stared at my crown in the mirror. I didn't know why, but that bit of plastic, rhinestones, and glitter scared the crap out of me. I was horrified but captivated, confused but thrilled. Me, I whispered to my reflection. They chose me. It didn't make any sense. I was an outsider. I wasn't popular. I wore grungy denim, not designer studs. I couldn't care less if my makeup was mineral based. I didn't even wear makeup. But once again, I couldn't deny who stared back at me in the mirror. That girl. That girl wore lip gloss and foundation. That girl spent a ridiculous amount of money on one hairstyle. She also dated the star quarterback and had cheered for him during the game. That girl was just named Princess for her class's court and wore a goofy crown as proof. But that's Demi, I thought. That image belonged to Demi, not me. I couldn't deny the obvious, though, not when it was staring back at me in the school's brightly lit bathroom mirror. I exited and pushed open the double doors that led outside. I took one breath, then another. Demi should have been here, not me. This was her world. I didn't belong in it. I was just faking. Bitterness crept up and I couldn't push it down. This was all Demi's fault. Because of her, I was lost in this maze, attempting to solve questions she had been too selfish to answer. I let out a bitter laugh. At this point, all I knew was Demi had been a moody, depressed con artist who had everyone fooled, particularly the sister who thought she had known everything there was to know about her sibling. So in this particular scene, the S.U.P.A that Desi has to face challenges her identity. And in fact, throughout the book, Desi gets the most challenge and receives like the most confusion and tension when faced with a S.U.P.A, the social norms. And so when you think about social norm, think of pretty much, it's like the rules, the boundaries, the standards that we have that kind of set the social tone, And so I was really thinking, like, why are social cues, why are S.U.P.A so important? And I came up with a few things. First of all, social norm, which is something, again, that defines our behaviors and kind of sets the standard of how to act and what to say and how to behave, it sets an expectation, so it allows us kind of like this, know the boundaries of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. It's also a checks and balance. It helps to kind of, if you were to deviate for this social norm, you may be punished. But also may reward you. It may, reinforce you when you are, following the social norm. And it provides order and predictability. And who doesn't want order and predictability, It kind of helps us to know what to expect in this kind of social environment or in this social setting. But then I had to be honest and I had to really think about, well, what are the things that are not so good about S.U.P.A or social norms? And I came up with a list too. One is subjective. Subjective meaning that it's based on opinion. And so it's what, people may consider to be what's acceptable versus what not is acceptable. So it's not necessarily fact, it's the opinion of others. Two, especially in the high school setting, you have like this small group of people who usually dictate what the S.U.P.As are, what the social norms are. And it's usually the popular people. So this is great if you're one of the popular kids. But if you're not, like if you're socially awkward or whatever, or if you're like a Desi, you may find yourself like having tension or being challenged to have to deal and cope with these social norms. But also it may go against your own personal convictions. And this is actually what happens a lot with Desi, is that for one, she didn't realize that a lot of these S.U.P.As existed. She kind of figured them out, but she didn't really have the first-hand experience until she started hanging out with the clique. And so when she was finally face to face with these S.U.P.As, they really, really kind of challenge her because they went against like her own personal convictions. At certain points in the book, she had to face things that she hadn't dealt before, she hadn't faced before. She had to face things like, talks about, boys, guys, and that may be a good thing. But she also had to face alcohol, alcohol, the concept of alcohol, or the opportunity to drink came up a lot, as well as sex, the most uncomfortable word, right? She actually had to face this topic of sex. And so it kind of challenged who she thought she was. And it kind of, I would say, the S.U.P.As were really like the mirror that she had to use to see what was reflected. She thought she knew herself. She also thought she knew her sister. But when presented with these SUPAs and presented with these social norms, she was challenged. She had to really struggle with who she thought she was in her identity. And so one positive thing I can say that's definitely taken from the book is SUPA and social norms can help to remind us that, we may be different and we may be peculiar. And maybe there's nothing wrong. Maybe that's not a bad thing to be different, to be peculiar, to be set aside. And so it also may challenge us to really figure out, what's our identity. And so throughout the whole process, especially after an unexpected event happened, Desi became really focused and centered on trying to not only reconcile the images she thought she knew about her sister, especially in comparison to what she learned about her sister during this process, but she was like really challenged and motivated to figure out about herself. So SUPAs can be great in identifying or pushing you to really identify what your identity is, who you think you are and how you feel about yourself. Again, it's going back to self-esteem. It's going back to identity. And this process helped to shape Desi, encourage Desi to get a better understanding of who she was. And in fact, she actually challenged one of the SUPAs. And again, the U in SUPA is unspoken. Well, Miss Desi decides to, at one point, be bold. And she decides to challenge a SUPA in such a public way. She kind of puts it on blast. What was unspoken, she decides she's going to blast it. She's going to publicly talk about it, publicly, confront it. And she does it in such a way that's only Desi. And so what I challenge you guys to do at the end of the day is to think about the goods and the not so goods that come with SUPA, and see how the SUPAs in your life, how they have helped to shape you, or how you can use them to embrace your true identity. If we were to hold up that mirror, what would we see? The beauty, the ugly, the good, the bad. And how could we embrace that entire image, the beauty and the bad, the ugly and the good? How can we embrace that as, it's okay, because this is who I am and this is what makes me unique. And there's no one else out here in this world that's like you. So how can we embrace it? So I would like to wrap up with inspirational quotes, because I love a quote, and I'm going to share some of my favorite ones. And this is just all about, owning who you are, owning your identity, and using things even like the SUPAs, the standard, unspoken, and publicly accepted, and the things that we may not like about SUPAs, how we can even use that to embrace ourselves a little bit better. So, okay, the first one is, be yourself, everyone else is already taken. And that's by Oscar Wilde. The next one is, imperfection is beauty, madness is genius, and it's better to be absolutely ridiculous than absolutely boring. That was by Miss Marilyn Monroe. Next one, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. And this is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And this is probably one of my top 5 favorite ones. In a world where, it may be so easy to fit the norm, that it's okay to be peculiar because we're set aside for a higher purpose, And the last one is, you are you. Now, isn't that pleasant? And that was by Dr. Seuss. So until we see each other again for the last week, for Mirror and Reflection, that is. The last time for Mirror and Reflections, but you will see more of me. I say God bless and have a good one. Bye.